Thank you, Steffi, and thank you for another amazing DLD. I love coming here every year. I love the way it opens our mind. So this is, I must say, this is a little of a role reversal for me. As a journalist, my job most of the time is to raise the questions, is to poke the challenges. So it's a little unusual. I am really excited by this technology, and I am one of those people who also wants to see us apply the same ethics and standards and put some guardrails in place. But I want to take this opportunity. I do think it is important for us, even to understand the challenges, we have to really understand what this technology is going to open up, what it can do. I still think we need to have the conversation that was happening just before us. But I think as much as there's a huge amount of hype, and we say generative AI and we say ChatGPT, if we'd had a drinking game every time ChatGPT was mentioned at this conference, we'd have been dead in the first hour. But we haven't really talked about what is it really opening up. Like, I think we all know we can type in a set of prompts and get an amazing piece of art. We can have an incredibly interesting conversation with a computer that wasn't possible a couple of years ago. But I really think that's scratching the surface of what the technology can allow. So I'm fortunate to be joined by Mark and Tom to talk about what are some of the non-obvious ways this technology is already going. Where can it go? And it's really not limited to this tiny surface that we've seen. Tom, obviously, you guys are doing a lot of this work. You're seeing a lot of it. Mark, you're already using it to do projects. So maybe if you can each talk about how you came to generative AI and what are the possibilities you're seeing already?
Sure, yeah. So I came into the whole industry through the open source community. I discovered a community that was working on generative imagery and art, using that for animation and video. I worked in that community in my spare time for a year or two, and eventually ended up building something that became part of Stability. I'm really fortunate to have worked with some amazing people in the space and kind of been through this whole journey over the last couple of years to see it come to where it is now, and hopefully to a very exciting 2023.
And Mark, you know, you've been doing product design for a really long time.
30 years.
And all sorts of tools have come up. Where in that time, you know, things that helped prototype, things that, you know, 3D printing, all these things that helped your job, where does generative AI rank in terms of, you know, where you see it opening up your world of product design?
So I think it's probably not new to say that generative AI could essentially reframe how we encounter applications, how we encounter a lot of what we use a computer today to accomplish. Today, if you all think about your life with a computer, whether it be in an enterprise situation or a consumer, as a consumer, you've got a phone with you and you've predicted all of the apps that you need, and that's what your phone can do. If you need to look up information, you use the web. What we imagine and what we've encountered in some new work that we're doing is an environment where something like ChatGPT, I don't really have a horse in that race, but a natural query would, instead of having to have all of the apps that you imagine you might need, is the way in which you invoke an application that might only exist for the few minutes that you need to solve a problem. So these discussions of whether ChatGPT actually can tell you lies or isn't fully trained is, to me, far less interesting than the idea that it is a very useful engine to invoke just lots of small moments that today need to be packaged up in applications that have sufficient economy built around them, that we're willing to publish them, that we're willing to take the time to engineer them. And through that, we can orchestrate much more interesting moments without the overhead of having to learn each application, download them, manage them, or think about the things we do on the web where we go and we'll search up a topic. We'll go down that rabbit hole of that website. Does that have what I'm looking for? We'll come back up the rabbit hole. We'll go down another one. ChatGPT and tools like that do a great job of being able to bring that information to the forefront, but think about like snippets of applications, we might navigate those solutions through a conversation.
So there's a lot in what you just said, and I want to unpack it, because I think not everyone may have gotten all the different things that you were saying in there. One is this idea, and personally, I've long thought the app metaphor, as wonderful as it is, was really ready to be replaced 5 or 10 years ago. The idea, for example, I want something that's very DLD-centric for this moment that we're here. It should never have to be a separate app that I download and then sits on my phone for the other 11 months of the year. That was true. Generative AI has nothing to do with that. Where it does come in is, for example, we're in Germany. I want lots of access to translation or whatever. I don't need a Google Translate app. What I need is a tool that when I want to translate something, does it, and generative is certainly plenty good at being the interface to that. So instead of having a million apps on your phone, you have certain apps, but really AI can be a bridge to navigating. So in this example, generative AI helps you interact with your phone, for example.
Helps you compose a moment. Like we're here at DLD, didn't download the app, but the question, just the open question, what's up next, makes no sense to a computer today. But using a bit of generative AI, you could bring that context up, bring just enough information up that essentially you've got that answer. And it doesn't have to be made into a strict conversation. It could be a little bit of act functionality and a little bit of conversation.
And then you brought up one thing that I want to dive in, and then I want to get back to you, Tom. The idea that, we have talked about the confidently wrong problem. I know you guys are like to throw cold water on the cold water. I do think it's a big issue, but I think one of the ways that it can be dealt with is acknowledging what are the use cases in which the penalty for being wrong, computers are wrong all the time. It's right. You don't turn over, it's which decisions you turn over. Obviously, if it's a piece of the creative process, and Tom, this is where you guys have worked a lot, it doesn't have to get it right. The goal, there isn't a right answer. I mean, it seems to me that one of the areas where generative AI is most exciting and where artists are already jumping on this is ideation, is helping just come up with a bunch of ideas, and then the human being can take it from there. Just whet people's appetite for some of how you guys are using stability. People are using what you guys are creating, and I think it's also an opportunity to talk about why you guys went with the API approach so that people can take it and run with it in different directions.
Yeah, so this is a creative tool. At its heart, what's happened in the last couple of years is that it's been possible to take this enormous data set and compress it in a way that's extremely efficient and results in the models being very generalist. What our aim is to build foundational models and then to give them away. The reason for that is that when this technology is given away in its purest form, that the weights and the models are personalizable and customizable by the end user, by the communities, what you see is this explosion of activity around tooling and modification and customization that can't happen when the model is closed. So since September, when we released Stable Diffusion, now even today we have every day 5 or 6 new GitHub repos and projects and small teams that are working on new ways to inject new functionality and concepts and tooling into the model. The best example of that is personalization. So one of the things that is almost daunting about the models is that you're greeted by this prompt and you kind of, what do you do next? the model contains all this information, but how do you get out of it the thing that you want? And in terms of applying it to business and to enterprise and even to personal customization, you need to inject new concepts into the models. So techniques such as Dream Booth, which was developed by a member of the community a week after we released Stable Diffusion. It was a week or 2 weeks that this technology took to emerge. And now there are 20 types of personalization. And that allows you to put product concepts, styles, your own face or whatever it is.
So I want to help people understand what you're saying, because again, I think your answer is kind of clinical and nuanced, and I want to really open people's minds. So, for example, today, if you're using DALL-E 2 or one of these tools that's out there, or the off-the-shelf Stable Diffusion, you can type in something, but it's not bounded in any sort of, and bring in this specific piece of content. What having it open with an API model is saying, okay, I want all the benefits of the creativity, but I want, say, me as a consumer, I want to put me in front of all these fantasy things. So, you know, fix me as actually me.
Stormtrooper, it's not gonna know.
Yeah. And then secondly, if you're like a company, BMW, for example, you know, you have actual assets that you want some fidelity around. You want to bring your IP. There's a lot of interesting issues around IP infringement, but here you want your IP. You want your logo to look like your logo. You want your car to look like your car, but then you want a lot of creativity around it. Is that the kind of thing we're talking about?
Yeah, these models, the baseline models are foundational. It is the customization of them and the personalization that offers, you know, really big new opportunities. You mentioned car brands putting a car with the logo represented in the correct way, that the marketing teams are happy with the representation, and that allows you to put the car into any environment in a couple of seconds. And again, we're seeing the generation of media through the models. You know, the time is coming down all the time. Where we started, Stable Diffusion took 5 or 6 seconds to generate an image, and now we're down to sort of 0.9 seconds. And this is going to happen with video, it's going to happen with audio, with 3D and language. All of these modalities are going to emerge this year. And our aim is to provide all those foundational models that will lead to each of those happening.
And I want to address one of the criticisms. You know, one of the criticisms is, you know, we won't need creative types because I can sit, you know, already I can say to the existing version of ChatGPT, take this one thing I love The Office, but, you know, write me a script for The Office set in, you know, with Shakespearean dialogue, and it'll do a pretty good job. Talk about how, you know, from my perspective, the optimistic case is it creates a whole new opportunity for the fan base, for individuals to play around. But that only works if then the creatives, it takes to another level. Talk about how people that own IP, you know, how can Pixar use it to help with the next version of Inside Out? Or is this the end of creativity? And I know because of which panel we're on, and I know you two, it's not going to be the end of professional creativity. What does it mean for the actual, you know, artists, writers? How are people who have that going to use generative AI to keep ahead of what anyone can do with a box?
So in my experience, the first adopters of this technology were artists. That's how I discovered it. And yeah, we're working with film companies to let them build custom models that, you know, for all kinds of different animated movies, and allow them to do concepting and storyboarding. This is a creative assist. It's a creative tool. It's not designed to replace the artist. There was a good tweet I saw last week, and it said, you know, am I going to be replaced by AI? Well, no, you're going to be replaced by someone using AI. It's a creative tool, and very much not meant to be a replacement.
And we consume content generated for the masses. When you look at a pair of shoes you might want to buy, you just see them typically in repose on like a white cyc, or you see them on a model that maybe doesn't look anything like you. I think in a few years we will find that almost all of our searches are generating content with marketing copy, and trust me, replacing marketing copy with an AI is typically going to feel like an improvement. With photography that has been modeled for us. So when I search for a pair of running shoes, I'll see a 50-year-old blonde man maybe running along the lake in Austin, Texas, and be like, I can see myself in those shoes. And it's been designed for me. No one else will ever see that image. I may never see that image again as well. I think that the temporal nature of content that we consume today will become extremely normal, which was back to my original point. The temporal nature of the functionality we consume, even that moment where I invoked those shoes in a shopping situation, will have come from a request I made. And so rather than worrying about GPT finding the exact truth, it simply presented just a tiny little window of an app that offered me that moment, which of course inside of that offered me very custom content for what I'm asking to do right then.
And you've dealt with so many of these new tools along the way. I mean, I think of, I go back to, the Macintosh really allowing me, even though I have very poor ability to translate something that I see into a freehand. I can't draw. I draw like a kindergartner who's not very good at art. But that allowed me, I do have a sense for design, and that opened up that door. 3D printing allowed you to bring that into the world. My sense is that there's an element of generative that's just going to raise the bar of what an individual can do. Talk about what it can do more broadly. What are some of when you start dreaming, what are the things you dream of that you expect?
Is part talent and part time. The number of iterations that you're afforded the time to create. And right now for us, generating iterations gives us just a sightline, a sampling set of possibilities. It takes us out of our innate response to a problem. It takes us out of the presumption that there is this right answer, because you see a lot of wrong answers, but amongst that garbage is one thing you didn't think of, and it takes you there. So in the creative act, I'm not worried about it doing it, because often that doing it is the commitment of my taste to a final product, as opposed to the production labor it took to make it. So if it can solve the production part of it, hallelujah. If it can help me with the sampling, I become more creative. So absolutely not afraid of it. I get the fine artists worrying about it, because for us as consumers, we don't necessarily know the difference between a extremely arduously produced thing and something just cocked off in a few seconds with a query. But I think we go back to, get philosophical here, but when we go to media, we think about like the Mona Lisa. The Mona Lisa is amazing because it's good, but also because we as society have chosen to say it's good. There are a lot of beautiful pieces of art that we simply have not put our finger on and said that's important. And so computer-generated art of all kinds, especially AI-generated art, will fall into that greater sociological question, not a production question. So to me, I'm not afraid of it.
So my goal for the end of this session is that everyone is kind of leaving the room thinking, what could this allow me to do in my field? Tom, what are some of the things that you've seen that you're most excited about, that you've seen, again, because one of the choices you made early on was to put this out there into the world and let people have it and let people do it. What are some of the most exciting things you've seen people do that maybe you hadn't thought of, or no one at Stability had thought of? Yeah, so I mean, look, just to echo what Mark was just saying, the bidirectional nature of the interaction with these tools is something that it's a creative tool of expression, but it also gives you ideas. And that feedback loop is something that I think is completely new. And we've seen that with image. At Stability, we're working on these other modalities, and I think this year is going to be hugely exciting. We're seeing, we're working on a video model, we're working on audio models. Video is going to be a huge new architecture and a huge new opportunity. If you look at content creation platforms, the ability to automate short form and eventually long form of video is going to be hugely exciting. The idea you can personalize your own experiences, whether it be through film or TV or music, is hugely exciting. So
we're working hard on that and looking forward to bringing it again to the community, which will be releasing all the models open source.
So I hope this gives you a taste. Look, I'm a journalist, which means I'm skeptical by nature. I don't want to discount all the things you heard in the last session. We do, I believe, need guardrails. We do need to account. I am worried about what this is going to mean for misinformation, for all sorts of things. So don't get me wrong, but those things are going to happen whether we use the tools or not. The tools are here. People are going to harness them. What I do hope is that each of you, whatever you do, whether you're a writer, an artist, a lawyer, a doctor, are thinking about, what could this do for me? Because we will have all the downsides whether we seize the technology or not. And I do agree with the quote. Like the job most threatened is going to be the person who says, I'm going to ignore this technology. So this is just the beginning of the conversation. We've had more. We need to have more. Thank you all very much. If you enjoyed this conversation, I do a daily newsletter. As Steffi mentioned, you just go to getlogin.axios.com, and I'll be in your inbox every day. Thank you, Mark and Tom.